Hi, everybody. So as this is a Caucasus Network first anthropology event, I think this is a great chance to introduce our network to those of you who are joining for the first time. So we are a group of master and PhD students working on the Caucasus. The aim of our network to bring together regional, archaeological, anthropological, and historical debates and discuss current research carried out in the Caucasus. So we are open to the field of history, art history, anthropology, archaeology, medieval studies related to the Caucasus and adjacent region. So network is an inclusive and encouraging environment. So we put a strong emphasis on uniting, transcending national boundaries and enhancing dialogue. So importantly, we provide a space for young scholars to showcase their work and thereby facilitate knowledge exchange amongst scholars and early career researchers. So I'm going to give a floor to Gwen to introduce event program. Thank you.
I'm going to go through the event program. So first we have the honor to listen to Alexander Kavtaradze about his project. He's a PhD student at Ilia State University, and he will be speaking about the Udis of Georgia, the question of identity in Soviet and post-Soviet era, which will be followed by a short Q&A. After that, we have the honor to listen to Mariam Shalvashvili, also a PhD student at Ilia State University, titled Doubting the State, the Political and Affective Role of Rumors and Conspiracy Theories in Pankisi, which will also be followed by a Q&A and a short break. After the break, we have the honor to listen to Dato Laghidze, talking about airports revolution in Georgia between modernization and globalization, which will also be followed by a short Q&A. And finally, we have the honor to listen to Esma Berikishvili, also a PhD student at Ilia State University, the city on the edge, 3 stages of Poti seaport development. And at the end, we'll have an overall discussion where everyone can chip in and the concluding remarks. And I'm handing, I'm going to introduce the moderator now and then hand over to you. So we have the great honor to have Dr. Mariam Darchiashvili to be the moderator of this event. As I mentioned before, she's an assistant professor at Ilia State University. She graduated from the Central European University, Faculty of Political Science at MA level. She gained her doctorate degree in the field of sociology from Ilia State University, and her dissertation examined everyday economic and cultural practices of Muslim Meshkatians living in the village Nazakirali. So her main research interests are there for religion, informality, networks, economic practices, migrations, and mobilities. So Mariam, the floor is all yours.
Thank you very much, Gwen, for introducing me, for inviting me to moderate this anthropological seminar. Our first speaker is, as you said, Alexander Kavtaradze. He is a PhD student at Ilia State University in Cultural Studies. He graduated from Eastern University, United States, with BA in History. He also did exchange program in 2010 in Oxford University, studying Caucasian, Albanian, and Ancient Greek history. He got his MA degree in political anthropology from Ilia State University in 2014. Alexandra is a founder and active member of NGOs, Civic Hall and Udis of Georgia, focusing on cultural and educational projects and activities. He's part Georgian, part Udi descent and speaks Udi language. His title today, his talk's title is Udis of Georgia, the question of identity in Soviet and post-Soviet era. Alexandra, the floor is yours, please.
Thank you. Well, let me start with a thank you to, first of all, to Caucasus Through Time Network and Gwen in particular for organizing all of this, and to Mariam for moderating, and all the participants and all those who are attending today. I will try to share my screen now. Hopefully it works. I hope all of you can see it. I have to apologize. I will be unable to go full screen because my computer freezes up instantly when I do that for some reason. So if I leave it like this, I hope it's okay and you're able to view. Anyway, as it was mentioned, my topic today and my research topic in general is the Udis of Georgia, or the Udis in general, the Udi people in general, but in this case, the Udis who live in Georgia, in Eastern Georgia, since 1922. And I'll be talking briefly about the historical context that is earlier than pre-Soviet historical context, and then be moving towards the Soviet and post-Soviet eras. I won't be talking much about theoretical frameworks because I think we don't have enough time for that. So this will be more like a brief overview of this question of identity of the Udis who reside in Georgia. And as I mentioned, with a brief sort of historical context, even before those part of Udis, the Udi community moved to Georgia from Azerbaijan. First of all, I've carried out my research both in Azerbaijan and Georgia. So I had basically since 2018, I have had 3 fields, research fields, ethnographic fields. And these have been in Azerbaijan. There are 2 places where Udis live compactly. One is the village of Nij, another one is the town of Oruz that used to be the village of Artishan. And in Georgia, that's the village of Zinobiani, which is located in Eastern Georgia in Kavtaradze region. First of all, start with the historical context, as I mentioned. The question of Udi identity in general, it is tied to Caucasian Albania, a kingdom that used to exist in modern-day Azerbaijan, at least in most of its territories, and also encompassed partly southern Dagestan and at times even easternmost parts of Georgia. According to the sources that we have, there were numerous tribes that lived in the kingdom, in the Caucasian Albanian kingdom. According to Strabo, for example, there were 26 tribes, although we're not sure about all of those. But we definitely know that Udis were one of the main tribes, and perhaps one of the most numerous tribes out of all these different tribes living in Caucasian Albania. They were directly, they're considered to be direct descendants of Caucasian Albanians because of that, and also because of the direct link, linguistic link with the Caucasian Albanian language. Caucasian Albanian kingdom ceased to exist sometime in 8th, 9th centuries. It disintegrated, especially after the Arab invasion of the Caucasus. And that's when it started, basically, the disintegration process of the Caucasian Albanian kingdom. And most of the tribes, at least that's the understanding that we have at the moment, they most likely mixed with neighboring people, be it Armenians or be it Georgians, but also with other groups that were coming to the region starting in 11th century, and I mainly mean various Turkish tribes. And the Udis were not exempt from that process, but some Udis managed to retain some sort of a separate identity, which presented itself in their language, first of all, and also as these territories became, predominantly Muslim, they also became a Christian minority, basically, and that also became part of their identity. We know that Udis had lived in several villages still by 18th century, We know this especially from the letter that was sent to the Russian Emperor Peter the Great in 1724 by the Udis from at least 7 villages in modern-day Azerbaijan. They were talking about persecutions and asking for help. But what is interesting in this letter that pertains to the question of identity is that we learn from it that Udis, by this time, it's already 18th century, as I mentioned, still identify as Albanians because they mention the term Arwans. And Arwank or Arwan or Alwank were the terms that Armenians used for Albanians. So they mention this, that there are Arwans from the tribe of Utis or Udis. But by 19th century, it seems that that knowledge is being lost gradually. At least it is not as central as it used to be to the Udi identity. And what defines Udi identity, starting from 19th century especially, are 2 different Christian denominations that Udis belong to at that point. Historically, Caucasian Albania used to be mostly within the Miaphysite or Monophysite tradition that Armenian Apostolic Church was in as well. But it's been switching back and forth at times. But perhaps most of the Udis belonged initially to that tradition. But by 18th century, as these areas seem to have had some Georgian influence, or the influence of the Eastern Georgian Kingdom under Erekle II, it seems that some Udis started reconverting or converting to the Orthodox denomination. By 19th century, as the Russian Empire enters the region, Russians are also actively using the question of orthodoxy. They even have a society for the spread and maintenance of the Orthodox faith in the Caucasus. And within that framework, by 19th century, the beginning of 20th, more Udis convert to the Orthodox or switch to the Orthodox denomination, but others remain under the influence of the Armenian Apostolic Church. So these 2 denominations and the belonging to these 2 different denominations starts to have an important and a serious effect on Udi identity itself. So those belonging to the Armenian Apostolic Church start to identify more and more as Armenians, and many of them are basically have Armenian surnames by that time, or gradually at least. They're mixed families, lots of mixed families, Udi Armenian families, and the next generations basically already identify as Armenians, but there are also a number of Udis who still consider themselves Udis but belong to that tradition. But the Orthodox Udis actually become more and more identified with the neighboring Georgians, because that would be the closest neighbor that were Orthodox as well. So to the point that actually some Georgian writings from that time, from the beginning of 20th century especially, suggest that Udis are basically Georgians, that these Orthodox Udis are somehow one of these lost Georgian tribes, and they completely disregard the fact that they speak in a completely different language. These denominations had a series of effects on the identity of Udis. So Udis nowadays, they live, as I mentioned, in mainly in 3 areas: 2 in Azerbaijan, 1 in Georgia, but also an increasing number in Russian Federation after many left due to different reasons, economic or other reasons. There was also a small mixed community in Armenia as well. Now to move briefly to how Udis ended up in Georgia. That happened in 1922, as I mentioned in the introduction, and that was due to a conflict between Azerbaijani and Armenian populations in Azerbaijan, in modern state of Azerbaijan. The Udis, as a Christian minority, felt under serious threats, and they part of them moved to what is now Georgia. They were led there by a man called Berikishvili, and the village accordingly that Udis established in Georgia and Kakheti region was named after him and is still called Zinobiani. It is in Kvareli municipality in the easternmost region of Georgia. As soon as they arrived, they were actually quite welcomed by the certain segments of Georgian society, and we can see it from the newspapers that were published back then. We can also see from the fact that a society was established to help the newly arrived Udis, and they were referred to as Georgian Udis. Again, underlining this fact that the perception in the Georgian society, at least in this segment that knew about Udis, was that somehow these Udis were part of Georgian identity, part of Georgian nation. What also sort of helped that notion is that over time, Udi surnames received Georgian-sounding endings to their surnames. So that meant that the surnames were converted would have endings like Shvili and Ze, which are classical sort of, but mostly Shvili, that are classical sort of Georgian endings. Well, as I already mentioned, the organization for helping them, the identity of Udis at that point, well, when talking about the identity of Udis at that point, Caucasian Albania is almost never mentioned. There are some exceptions, especially from the linguistic point of view, as some of the linguists in Georgia as well notice that they again, or discover that there is a clear evidence that Udis speak some sort of Caucasian Albanian. So hence, therefore, they must be the descendants of the Caucasian Albanians. But again, it is this knowledge is widespread, and within the Udi community, also the perception more and more switches to the idea that they are more Georgian than belonging to any other nation. Well, in 1938, the first leader of the community and person who established the village was executed by the Soviets during the Great Purge, and the village was renamed from Zinobiani to Oktomberi. And it wasn't the aid and the help for the Udis wasn't there anymore, almost. At least that's how it's remembered today in Zinobiani. So 1938 is viewed as a turning point in this regard. Here's some pictures while I'll be talking about moving towards the process of passportization and how Udis started receiving sort of Georgian documents. At that point, there was a confusion, as you know, some of you might know, in those documents, official documents, there was a certain segment for nationality. Or ethnicity rather, but it was called nationality at that point. So when Udis would go to take this, to receive these documents, they would say, when they would be asked about nationality, they would say Udi. Most of the people would know what it meant. So they would usually write Georgian in there. And that also had an influence on how Udis themselves viewed themselves, but also how others viewed them. And as we move to post-Soviet period, and I know that I have only a few minutes left, there were increasing number of mixed families, and that happened even in Soviet times, meaning Georgian Udi families. There's a gradual loss of language, Udi language. Nowadays, in younger generations, there's an exception, basically, of few young people who are able to speak Udi. Most of them are no longer able to communicate in Udi or understand it. So that has had an effect also to the point that many Udis actually, especially from the older generations, because younger generations have now access to different information about Caucasian Albania and so on, but older generation, that factor of Caucasian Albania is virtually almost absent from their narratives. And the attitudes within Georgia also kept changing, especially towards the end of 80s and beginning of 90s with the rise of ethno-nationalism that also sidelined some of the minorities in the country. So Udis more and more started identifying as Georgians, especially as most of them came from mixed families at that point. We got to the point where we have an interesting understanding of the identity at this point, even within the Udi community, where they would identify themselves as Georgians generally, but still an ethnic minority. So we got to that strange point where people can be Georgians, who can identify themselves as Georgians, but still be an ethnic minority and acknowledge themselves as an ethnic minority as well. But in the end, I would just like to say that what is also central to the identity of Udis, beyond these ethnic and nationality issues, is the persecution narratives that are always there in the background. Whenever I would conduct interviews out in the field, it's always there. So to always underlining the persecution, historic persecutions, not only in the beginning of 20th century, but even before that. And that has become quite important, and that has played a central role in Udi identity. I suppose because we had a very brief time, I will stop here, and if there will be any questions, I'll be more than glad to answer. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Alexander. We have a question. How does the status of national awareness among Udis in Georgia compare to other groups in Georgia with contested identities, such as groups with debated language, dialect status like Migralians?
Thank you for the question, Harold. Well, that's an interesting question, actually. I haven't thought much about it, but as I mentioned, the Udi case is quite interesting and maybe perhaps even unique in the sense that that's a good comparison. I don't know if Udis would view themselves a group like Mingrelians or Swans, who have their own languages as well, but those languages are considered as belonging to the Kartvelian languages. They are definitely languages, but belonging to the sort of this group. They are called Kartvelian languages. The Udi language actually belongs to Nakh Dagestanian languages, and it's more related to the Dagestanian language, Southern Dagestanian languages. So that plays a factor definitely in understanding the identity. But for Udis themselves, again, as I mentioned, for them, the general understanding is that they are Georgians like others. For example, I've had in the interviews, people say that, yeah, talking about other groups, yeah, they're like Georgians like us. But there is still in the narrative, there is still that notion of being an ethnic minority. So I think there is no clear understanding, basically due to lack of information about their own history. About that was the case in my family as well, about the identity of the people, of their own community. But that, as I mentioned, in the younger generation, that is slightly changing, at least partly because as the information becomes more easily accessible, more and more people get to know about Caucasian Albanian history, hence the Udi history, and so on, and they start to make a link between these two. But as a comparison, I mean, I would say that as from the Georgian side, the state views Udis as ethnic minority as opposed to Migrelians and Svanetians. But due to these lots of mixed families in the village of Zinobiani itself, it's almost hard for them also to differentiate between Georgians and Udis at this point.
Thank you, Sandra. We have two more questions from Anusha Shiva. Do you have theoretical or conceptual framework, and do you use comparative perspective? One question, and another question is, what's the relationship between Udis of Georgia and Azerbaijan? Do they have data about that? If you have a data about that.
Thank you. Well, to answer the first question, yes. Well, I had a theoretical frameworks that I used for example, one of the recent articles that I'm revising at the moment, actually, which is mainly about the Udis of Oghuz in Azerbaijan, which used to be Vartashen. The village of Vartashen is now the town of Oghuz, where only 16 Udi families are left at this point. Was actually the notions of time and space, or the space-time, the term that has been used in anthropology for quite some time, and many anthropologists have written about these two concepts. These seem to me to be quite central to understanding at least in particular, the Oghuz situation at the moment. But I'm still thinking about several options when it comes to Xenobiani itself, actually. Although time and space, the concepts of time and space are, I think, also applicable to Xenobiani as well. But because I'm also actively involved in, I suppose, maybe in a way, creating some new spaces within Xenobiani through my work, I think with other people involved, obviously from there, I don't know how right would it be for me to focus my research within that theoretical framework in Xenobiani as well. And to answer the next question about the relations between Udis of Georgia and Azerbaijan, well, thank you for the question. First of all, yes, well, they used to visit each other quite frequently during the Soviet period, and there were still clear connections there. People had relatives who stayed behind there, or who came to Georgia first but then moved back. And there were some mixed families also from Nij as well. For example, there's still two ladies, as far as I remember, from Nij, Udi ladies who married to Xenobiani Udis. So they have been, lots of contacts during the Soviet times, but that almost stopped in 90s after the breakup of the Soviet Union, where we have these hard borders again. That virtually stopped. And when I went to Oghuz, as I was talking to Udis there, they were also complaining that, for example, during those times when, not frequently these days, but when they would, especially in the past, in 90s or early 2000s, come to Georgia, they were invited to Georgia by the Udi acquaintances to attend some weddings and so on. They would complain that nobody spoke Udi, everybody spoke Georgian, so it was hard for them to understand anything and communicate. And that language barrier is becoming more and more clear as younger generations of Udis in Georgia are no longer able to speak the Udi language. But there is a plan and I'll finish with this one. There's a plan because there'll be in next year, there'll be 100 years since the Udis arrived in Georgia, and there is a plan for some Udis, younger generations and older ones, to go back to visit Oghuz, where they came from in 1922, and it will be most certainly an interesting event to observe. I think that meeting.
Thank you, Alexandra. We can continue discussion about this in the discussion time. We have a question. I believe, Sandra, you will read this question. Now, let me introduce Mariam Shalvashvili. She is a PhD student in social and cultural anthropology at Ilia State University. She received the Heinrich Böll Scholarship for her studies. Mariam graduated with bachelor's degree in social sciences from Free University, Georgia, and she got her master's degree in social anthropology from Central European University. She is a researcher at Georgian organization, Social Justice Center, researching political and economic disparities, solidarity practices, and women's issues in Georgia. She's teaching several courses in Free University of Georgia. Mariam's talk today is called Doubting the State, the Political and Affective Role of Rumors and Conspiracy Theories in Pangisi. Mariam, please, the mic is yours.
Thank you, Mariam. You can hear me well, right? Okay, I'll be sharing my presentation. You can see that, right? Okay. Okay, hello everyone. So I will get into my talk because I have lots of things to say. Well, because I knew that there would be international audience, I have decided to give a general context. So I might not have much time to talk about the theoretical framework that I'm trying to use. I have also added this rumors, mistrust, and conspiracy theories in Bankisi in the last couple of days, because I worked on my prospectus and I thought that was appropriate. So what is my goal? What is the goal of my research? It is to study a group of people, in this case, Kists in Georgia, that have long represented geographical and political periphery of Georgian nationhood. But what is interesting is that this group has often taken a central stage on national and international level. Bankisi has been marked as a dangerous place where terrorist groups have taken a refuge or where terrorists have been raised. So more specifically, what I plan to do is to study the everyday, mundane, visceral experience of politics and the effective reception of political governance, everyday discourses on the state and economic system. And I also want to study the role of rumors, mistrust, conspiracy theories, and doubts in the formation and practice of citizenship among Kistes in Bankisi, Georgia. I also wish to scrutinize mistrust and the conspiracy theories about Bankisi and what kind of reception that has in the region and what kind of life this takes on within Bankisi villages. So I'm going to show some of the pictures now. Some of them are taken by me, some of them I have taken from media. So to explain the context very briefly, is that who are Kists, right? It is ethnically, it is a Vainakh ethnic group, just like Ingushs and Chechens, but its name is Kistes in Georgia. So it's the same ethnic group, but they are called Kistes in Georgia. They have been, as I've seen, throughout different books, they have definitely come to Georgia throughout the centuries, starting from like very early 3rd century and maybe even before, but assimilated with Georgian groups. So they do not really, they do not really position themselves as Kistes anymore. But in 19th century, in mid-19th century, there was a new group that came to Bankisi Gorge, and this is the group that has retained its ethnic identity and calls themselves Kistes. So after 19th century, there was also a large wave in 1990s after Russian-Chechen war, and lots of refugees from Chechnya have come to Bankisi because they knew that their relative people lived here. So what happened during this war was that Russia really tried to mark all Chechen people as terrorists and to mark this war as war against terrorism and to associate these two words with each other, to make them synonyms, basically Chechen people and terrorists. So when these large numbers of people came to Georgia, as they were Chechens, this term of Russian politics was to apply this word as widely as possible. I would say it wasn't as successful until 9/11, but after 9/11 events, Russia positioned itself as a power that was going against and fighting against terrorism in this region. So it was easier to mark certain people as terrorists because this was something that was talked about more widely. There were also attempts to mark Georgian territory as terrorist, but in the end, we can say that Georgia sacrificed its one region to be marked as such, as dangerous, backward, uncivilized, and such, and took responsibility to fight against terrorism within its territory. So in early 2000s, there were, and I would say in 1990s, I would say there was lots of instability in Georgia, and especially in the border regions. So Bankisi is one of the border regions as well. And so it was apparent that in lots of such regions, there were some groups that were violent, for example, or people or groups that were involved in drug cartels and so on. Most of the time, they were also supported by the state, or so are the doubts amongst Georgians. So Bankisi was one of such territories. So it was easier to market as a place that has disorder, that has to be controlled. In 2000s, this politics continued because of 9/11, as I have mentioned. After 2003, when Saakashvili came to power, there were some tragedies that happened in this region in order to fight terrorism again. And after Ivanishvili came to power in 2012, after that, we have also witnessed a few operations in Bankisi that were positioned as fighting against terrorism, including 2017 killing of Tamerlan Mashalikashvili, which was most likely accidentally killed, but nevertheless, the government got involved in generating lots of doubts towards this family and towards this person who was a 19-year-old boy and or 19-year-old man, and he was supposed to become a terrorist because he was killed by the state. But there were lots of conspiracy theories towards this family as well as Bankisi that were generated from these events. And so in very soon after, 6 months later, the building of a new power plant was fought against by the local population. There were physical confrontations as well. So, okay, these are some of the contexts that I wanted to talk about. And now I can get into my research. I know that I don't have much time left though. Okay, so whenever you observe new infrastructural or hindered projects in Bankisi today, they are met with doubts, mistrust, fear, and alternative explanations of the cause of these events. In interviews on unrelated matters and in everyday conversations, both devoted supporters of oppositional parties and loyal supporters of the governing party thought that first they were punished for resisting the construction of the new power plant in 2018, and that's why certain projects were hindered. Or the same people, or maybe different people as well, have felt security gaze towards them, which was strengthening with these infrastructural projects. And so they thought that this security gaze towards them would become even more ubiquitous. So what are these new infrastructural projects? This is one police station, which is pretty large, and another one is school, but it hasn't been opened, the school, so there are doubts that this might not be school after all, and this might be some kind of a building that will be used to control the local population. So the building of these infrastructural projects or hindering certain other projects have generated lots of doubts and a lot of conspiracy theories here. So, so these are pictures of Bankisi, but I will move on to my research questions. So my questions are, what do conspiracy theories and mistrust expose about political struggles? What do doubts, rumors, and conspiracy theories tell us about the relationship between morality, political economy, and ultimately the larger nature of politics in Georgia? How do doubts and conspiracy theories about hidden political agendas expose operations of power and dispossessions? And a couple of others, such as how rumors or doubts in Bangisi express the ways in which residents interpret Georgian political and economic systems and how they perceive their role within the political and economic order. It's also important to recognize how state is involved in creating some official narratives. So Bangisi residents are often depicted as dangerous, culturally backward, or uncivilized in official state narratives. Therefore, in my research, I raised questions such as how can political consciousness and subjectivities be formed through these discursive mechanisms in Bangisi. So now I wanted to I have just started my fieldwork a few weeks ago, so I don't have much data, but I wanted to bring two quotes from the field. So the first one is from said by a woman in her early 50s, and she says, the police station that I talked about is in one end and the new school is in another end of Bangisi. Just like the police station, the new school has a few stories underneath. So people believe that there are a few stories underneath the ground. The village already has a school. Why would another one be necessary? The police station is already functioning and nobody knows what is going on in there. Even cleaners are from outside of this gorge. And the second one that is said by a 26-year-old man. How do we feel towards the state and its institutions? You know what younger people think? Most young people here think that at any moment, the state can make you a terrorist. We always feel that. The state will call you a terrorist and nobody will listen to you then. If anybody tries to listen to you then, they listen so that they can refute whatever you have to say. What is supposed to be the most trustworthy institution? The court. We both know how trustworthy it really is. So I wanted to stop sharing because I have few theoretical things that I wanted to add. Do I have some time or?
Yes, you can add some 2 minutes.
Okay, so Edward Said, when he wrote a book about how Islam is depicted in media, he has said that nowadays East is not anymore exotic East that we knew of, but a dangerous one. Books and articles that position themselves as neutral and objective are actually opinions or ill-informed pieces rather than well-researched articles. And in their works, Islam is depicted to explain everything that is going on. And Islamic countries and Islamic space is depicted as homogeneous monoliths. And as if Middle Ages explains the present and current political context. So these articles, as I said, imagine themselves as neutral, objective knowledge, but it's actually written with prejudices and fragmented knowledge. And this explanation very much suits Bangisi as well, because whenever such opinions are depicted about Bangisi, they are very much like very fragmented knowledge that people gather and not actually well-researched materials. And I also wanted to add something. I had much more, many more things prepared, but I will try to explain why it's important to study conspiracy theories or doubts and mistrust. And I think oftentimes we think of conspiracy theories as true or false, right? But I think what is important is to take them seriously and to understand what they indicate and what kind of worldview do they depict and what trajectories they take. As for mistrust and doubt, it is undeniable that nowadays the world and future political mobilization is no longer based on hope or idealism, but fear and mistrust towards people, as Matthias Pelkmans has said. So I think it is important to take these feelings, and doubt and mistrust are definitely, they have this affective dimension. It is important to take these seriously. Even if certain conspiracy theories are fragmented, even if some feelings are not very well expressed or verbalized, I think it is important because they might indicate towards certain hidden political powers, and they might expose something that was closed off before. So yes, I do want to say a lot more stuff about mistrust, doubts, and conspiracy theories. And if somebody has any questions, I'm open to answer them. But now I realize I don't have much time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mariam. Right now, we don't have questions in the chat box. Maybe somebody wants to ask. If you have questions, please, you can ask, or Mariam can add whatever she wanted to say. Oh, we have a question. Do you also focus on social media communications as part of the residents' everyday practices? We have a question from Shiva. Mariam.
That is an interesting, I haven't really considered that as much, to be honest, but I will take that into consideration. Maybe that will be important. What do you mean by social media communications? Like in between individuals, or what people serve on the internet? Because this is a very interesting approach and I haven't really considered it, I'll be honest. Okay.
And we have another question. What role does mistrust play in shaping state-key relationships in the perpetuation of Islamophobic stereotypes? But Shiva also replied, Mariam. Okay.
Yes, like about conspiracy. Yeah, yes, I'm taking that into consideration because lots of conspiracy theories do come from internet for sure and social media for sure. I am not observing the social media as much as of now, but I will in the future. But yes, I have noticed that, for example, about pandemic, lots of things come from internet, also from the latest events, tragic events that happened a week ago, after the Pride was supposed to be organized. I have noticed that lots of things that circulated within Bankesi were coming from the similar sources that I have also observed and marked in my brain as conspiracy theories. But I also want to say that conspiracy theories is a very political term, and I understand that it's not neutral. It has very normative aspect, and actually what it serves to do is to mark certain discourses as illegitimate and marginalize them, right? So I understand that when I'm using this word, I am also not using it neutrally, right? But I just haven't found the right replacement yet. So don't take it as if I'm saying that all these discourses are illegitimate. It's the opposite, that I'm saying that sometimes we might take certain conspiracy theories seriously because they might indicate something. Okay, and the second one was, what role does mistrust? Yeah, there's a great book by Barkaya and Janelidze, and they talk about that. It's not exactly about mistrust, but they do mention mistrust and doubts quite a lot, and they talk about how the state always has this security gaze towards Bankesi and always looks at it with mistrust and doubts. So yes, definitely mistrust does play a huge role in shaping this Islamophobic stereotypes, but not only stereotypes, but I would also say, go farther and say also politics, right? It's not only stereotypes, but it's actual actions that state takes.
We have a new question, Mariam. How important are ideas of the deeper pre-modern past in some of these conspiracy theories and narratives that you come across in your work? Or are they just very focused on modern state without much deeper history?
Yes, I do want to understand. It's not about, okay, I'm going as far as 1990s, because there are lots of different, what I would say, conspiracy theories about 1990s, like, for example, how Chechen people came here, because there are also doubts, right? Who told them that we lived here? Because they are, so there are some, I'm not going to say everything. Maybe it's, I will try to understand how to use these, some of these theories that I've heard in the field. And how to ethically use them. But there are also doubts towards these groups and mistrust. And it's undeniable that mistrust existed. And maybe in some ways it still does between the local group and the migrated group that migrated in 1990s. So yes, I'm going in the past as I don't know if you meant like a century ago. I'm not going that far into the past. But and
there is a second part of the question, Mariam, if you could.
Yes, it is also apparent, and sadly I didn't have much time to talk about that. But mistrust and doubt doesn't mean that you have general mistrust or doubt towards everyone, because in order to believe some of the conspiracy theories, you need to have a person, institution, Facebook group, I don't know, maybe a relative that you trust, because that's who spreads the information and you believe that. So those ties are definitely important, and some of these ties are international. It is also important to note that lots of people have migrated from Bangisi, and they live in Europe, Russia, some of them live in Central Asia. So it's a very international group itself. Lots of them come back in the summer, but it is in itself very international. And obviously the conspiracy theories about pandemic, certain groups, about certain things about our health or economy or world order are definitely international, and I am going to pay attention to that. And some of the mistrust that I'm talking about, I would say, is specific to Bangisi, but also shares lots of characteristics from different parts of Georgia. So I would say there is a general mistrust towards Georgian governance today. And it's difficult not to have that kind of mistrust, I would even argue. So yes, I am paying attention to both.
Thank you, Mariam. We just have 5 minutes for a break. I think we can skip it and continue with Dato's presentation. If you want Mariam to add something, you can add, and then we can continue with Dato's presentation.
Can I add?
Yes, you can add, and we can also give Alexandra opportunity to respond to the longer question, which was before. But Mariam, please add, and then we can continue with Alexandra, and then Dato will start his presentation. Please, Mariam.
Yes, there are just a couple of things that I wanted to add, not much. Yes, when we talk about conspiracy theories, I forgot to say that oftentimes it is marked as something irrational, as opposed to something rational that are spread by official discourses. And in my research, I'm trying to break that dichotomy as well apart, because what I'm trying to say is that kind of every discourse most of the time has this element of conspiracy in there. And I also wanted to add that, yeah, I'm just, yes, it is certain, we have to pay attention when we talk about conspiracy theories. Certain researchers have argued that when you call something conspiracy theory, you are supposed to have power. So only those who have power, groups or people or institutions, they can call other groups conspiracy theories. But in the recent years, it is also apparent that those who also have power, for example, Trump and his supporters, right? He was the president of the US. They have also been called conspiracy theorists. So these dynamics are changing a little bit, but still we have to keep in mind that most of the time when we hear conspiracy theories, it's most likely the people who have power or groups that have power call others who don't have that much power and mark them as irrational, and in order to marginalize them. So I wanted to add that dimension as well, that a lot of it has to do with power, and hopefully I will try to deconstruct these ideas or fragmented thoughts and affects that exist, and kind of try to I'm not trying to find whether some of them are true, obviously not, but whether they are they have something to say about the current political and economic system. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mariam. So, Alexandra, will you manage to respond to the long question in 3, 4, 5 minutes?
Yes, in fact, maybe even in 2. I'll try to be as brief as possible. There's a question from James, and thank you, James, for 2 questions rather, and thank you for those questions. They were both very interesting. Well, to answer first briefly, the oldest story that I have come across, which is pre-19th century, is actually 18th century, come across meaning in the interviews recorded in Zinobiani. And that has to do actually with the legends connected to the period of the invasion of Nader Shah, the Persian Shah, who came to the region in the 18th century. And according to the story, 7 Udi families, sort of these patriarchal families, left for the mountains because they were persecuted. The Udi community was persecuted. They left for the mountains, presumably went to Dagestan, and continued their fights against the forces of Nader Shah from there. And eventually they were granted, because they fought so valiantly, they were granted a place back in their home, and they were left alone with their own, religion and other aspects of their identity. That's the oldest story that I have recorded from the interviews that we have at the moment. To the second question, to answer briefly again, yes, absolutely. That means the Georgian identity is both within the Udi community. It's viewed both as civic in civic terms and ethnic terms as well. In both cases, that would be my understanding from the interviews that I have conducted at this point so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra and Mariam. We will come back to you in the discussion time. Now let's move to Dato Laghidze. Dato is a PhD student in social and cultural anthropology at Ilia State University. He's also a recipient of Hendrik Pjol Scholarship for his studies. He got his BA in law in 2013 from Ilia State University. He did his MA in 2016 and 2018 in Central European University in the field of nationalism studies. He got awarded study grant from International Educational Center and was also recipient of Open Society Budapest Foundation Scholarship. That also worked in Social Justice Center in Georgia. He is a co-founder of social movement, White Noise, and he also worked in Parliament of Georgia. Dato will speak today about airports, revolution and evolution in Georgia between modernization and globalization. Dato, floor is yours.
Did I share? Hi.
Yes, yes.
Oh, yes. No. Okay. So hello everybody. My presentation is a bit different from 2 others, I guess, because my focus is now infrastructure and airport, specifically in Georgia. And I titled this The Airport Revolution in Georgia Between Globalization and Modernization. I want to briefly introduce my the case. First of all, why I choose the airport, because you know, since 2003, Rose Revolution, airports became kind of emblematic character of Georgian modernization project. The airport was really one of the important things in Rose revolutionaries' mindset, that they were like kind of aimed to transform the country by like building the huge infrastructure, and airports was one of the main part of it, because also that Georgia, so they were like very like pro-Western, like bleeding hand Westernizers. They thought about themselves like that, and they thought that like airport is a like kind of place which can connect the Georgia with Europe. So they were like very much impressed by building the airport. So right after they came to power, they started the privatization of Tbilisi and Batumi airports to Turkish companies. This company which also like operates Istanbul Ataturk Airport and other airports in the Middle East and North Africa, in Libya and in Tunisia and in Egypt. And also it's like kind of one of the small airports in Doha and Qatar. So this company got this like 2 airports, and the government continued to building the airports. They built the Mesti airport. They built later. They started but finished. The current government finished this Ambrolauri airport. They were like aimed to be built at the same time the biggest airports. It was supposed to finish in 2013 in Poti, but it did not realize. They wanted to build another airport in Guria. So the president of Georgia was like claiming that Georgia will be famous for its airport. So, and he had this kind of Saakashvili had this kind of thing that everybody is surprised by like what we are doing, but like everybody speaks about us. So he was claiming that like this bringing the attention, this like kind of this type of development. So. And between this like kind of chaos and like building airports there and here, they like kind of aim to construct a new airport in Kutaisi, which is like 35 kilometers from the capital, so the second capital, as it is like kind of discursively claimed in Georgia or historically. And they constructed Kutaisi International Airport, which is like close to the city of Kutaisi. The part of this construction was that like it was aimed to be like cheap airlines to fly in Central Asia, Middle East, and Europe. So another main point why they built this airport and why it is important for me is that like the contract of Tbilisi and Batumi airports says that the government had no rights to build another airport too close to the city. So they like kind of found out that like, okay, they just measured, and so this was like 100 kilometers, like contract says 100 kilometers is their government has no right to build in this area. So they just like measured and built there. This was like considered to be like cheap airlines, which is now the cheapest cheapest airport in Georgia. It is state controlled and state company runs this airport. The government contracted this Dutch architectural company, which also built a lot of new, for example, Amsterdam airport and airports in China, in Hong Kong, in Singapore. So this company designed the whole airport in 2012, and they also like designed the new extension, which finished 2021. So airport is like fully sustainable. It uses underground water and through the heating, and air conditioning. So it is like very super modern, like the best thing you can see in the Western Georgia, built by government. So, and this kind of focus and this ambiguity and uncertainty, how this happened, why they constructed, like kind of urged me to like going more and more into the like kind of this space and place. And I found that there are like growing number of anthropological or sociological works concerning the airports in global north and global south. So many works studying, for example, labor in the airport and mobility, migration, and etc., etc. And this, yeah, and all of these works are some kind of connected to this like idea that like current globalization or accelerated globalization, whatever terms can be like kind of applied, creates this process of building and creating more and more spaces for capital accumulation, service economy, and like tourism is becoming the huge sector of economy in mostly in countries like Georgia, I would say, which is like tourist driven, and it also creates more like problems such as underdevelopment and precarity. So it is also at the same time, this is a place for it is transient, fluid, and non-fixed. So it is like not like a fixed place. And there's this wonderful work from Mark Auge, who develops a concept of non-place to study places and spaces like airport. He claims that supermodernity of current age creates non-places against the anthropological places. So if anthropology studying these places, which was bounded with identity, people, history, now he claims that we can study the places which is transient, fluid, not fixed, and which can be integrated into anthropological perspective. So I will just read my aim of this research. My present research aims to study the history, sovereignty, mobility in the airports by looking into the many factors that is human, non-human, other material assemblages, associations. I will study the second not successful history of the airport and contribute to the larger debate within the anthropology. So here I aim to study like what happened next. So yes, is this airport was like kind of project or plan to be very successful, like tourist driven and like kind of bringing the growth and like economic prosperity. So I want to read the second history of the airport, like how this airport relates to its unorthodox users. And these unorthodox users can be migrants who are like kind of interacting, and this airport became a huge migration infrastructure because people are going from there for the employment. Okay. For the employment in Europe, and so they are like considered to be unorthodox. They are like kind of skipped from this development, and how this development and how this globalization, modernization, I claim this is neoliberal modernization, which kind of transformed this, the Georgian context is targeted towards this group, and how they transformed their role and their like kind of connection with them. Then I want also to like investigate how certain groups like informal taxi drivers and their assemblages or their associations are interacting with migrants, and how their interaction with airports can be like captured. So the main aim is, of course, to like study the groups which are not written in this modernization project. Yeah. So this airport is kind of a place of hopes and this place of the future, but it turned to be like opposite, and I want to like investigate this opposite side of this project. So, and core methodology I have to do participant observation, and I have to spend around 9 months studying close to the city of Kutaisi, and to do interviews and to hang out in this wonderful super modern building. And so yes, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Dato. Now we have short Q&A. If you have questions to Dato is in his fieldwork right now. He can share his findings from there. So if you have questions, please ask. Or Dato, you can continue if you wanted to say something, and because of the shortage of time you didn't manage, you can elaborate now. Oh, we have a question from Manusha Shiva. Have you looked at airports as heterotopias?
Thank you. Yes, this was interesting, and I wanted to integrate this heterotopias in the project. But yes, it is really interesting, and I have to look also in this perspective, because once you are in nowhere and then entering into a space which is designed by Dutch architects, which designed also like kind of Madrid airport or something, and this is like kind of very in contrast with surrounding places. So it is like literally what Foucault was writing in Heterotopias, that it is like a completely other space. So, and yes, I think I will also integrate in my debate Foucault, but mostly I want to like follow Auger and like his claiming of these non-places, because this so we can also speak. I think that Auger's conception is much more appropriate and has much more better understanding of airports, because it is like the space which has to be like kind of transient, which you cannot like kind of capture. Yeah, but in Heterotopia's case, you can have this kind of space or like recreate identity or something, and spaces like Heterotopias.
We have another question. Is climate change a major part of public discourse around airports in the Georgian public sphere?
Yes, this is a question that definitely says no. I've never seen anything or any protest or anybody said anything about the climate change and airport. I know that it is like a big debate in Europe about the climate change and airport as a like kind of part of the emission, and there's like green policy of like building more railways and for mobility. But in Georgia, this is not the case. Or in my experience, I never see any debates surrounding or criticizing the airports for having, yeah. Georgians are moved for growth, I guess. Yes, but like at the same time, the Dutch company which built this airport using like I don't know, underground water, where they find the underground water, I don't know, but like they're clearly saying that heating and air conditioning is generated by underground water in the airport. And they have now the big terrace, and they designed this airport in like creating three spaces. One is the entrance. The second one is this like duty free and like zone, which is like control zone. And they have the third space, like at Heterotopia. They have this third place which you cannot like access in one part from the entrance, but in the second extension they created the third place which is hidden. You have to like kind of explore. And then you're like in the big terrace with like kind of green garden, and they claim that this place is for theater and performances, and people can have parties over there. So this is like very important, like very curious place, because architects say that people can have a party, which is like people are not living out there. So. And at the same time, having a party in airport, it's also like kind of, yeah, turns into a like very, very intensive place, because if you look around the city, there's not so much very funny atmosphere and like things like that. So, yeah, so this is like this airport has like very big contrast to other places.
Okay, very interesting. We have one more question for you, Dato. Are you going to look at how infrastructure itself changed to fit the needs of the unorthodoxy? How can these transformations illustrate Ong's concept of neoliberalism as a mobile technology?
Okay. How unorthodoxy users are changing, or how they're relating this infrastructure, right? Yes. Yes, this is my another way to address this this question, I guess, that like this infrastructure, like how these unorthodox users are like using or transforming, or like there are different like streams, and these groups are trying to appropriate this infrastructure. So yes, I think that how they appropriate it, how they change this infrastructure to for their consumption, it is what is their what is the current current consumption of this space, I would say, because it is primarily now, I would say, as a migration infrastructure, and people are like close to the cities, or even from Tbilisi are using this infrastructure in this direction.
Do you want to add on Ong, Dato?
Yes, because I'm using Ong. Because I'm using Ong as Ong's conception of neoliberalism as an exception. And I want to illustrate how this kind of infrastructure and this kind of developments are aimed not for these unorthodox users, and it is more in the need of this successful like winners of the globalization, or heroes of globalization, like Bauman said. Yes, and this how they are appropriating this, how the neoliberalism has like own like a Georgian like kind of character. This is literally what I want to illustrate. And what I want to illustrate is that how it is transformed in different directions. If I was clear enough.
Okay, we can close our short Q&A right now and move to another speaker. Dato, thank you very much for presentation and answers. And last but not least is our next and final presenter, Esma Berikishvili. Esma is a PhD student in social and cultural anthropology at Ilia State University. She got her BA in sociology from Tbilisi State University in 2008. Soon after, she did her MA in sociology and social anthropology at Central European University. Esma collaborated with different academic and research organizations. She worked on issues such as subcultures, social and urban movements in Georgia. Esma is an emerging producer for documentary films. Her talk today is on the city on the edge, 3 stages of POTI seaport development. Esma, mic is yours, please.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hello all. First of all, I want to say that I changed the title of the presentation. I was going through my old interviews, and what shook me was this talk that I had with one of the interlocutors, and he called POTI the city of eternal promises. So I decided to go with that line. So the talk is called The City of Eternal Promises, Informal Practices in POTI Seaport. And as I'm speaking to international audience, I will try to give a brief overview of the city. So it was built, a port was built during 1889, 1904, with the initiative and supervision of mayor of that time, Kavtaradze, who is also known as founding father of POTI. And starting from its early days, it always played an important role in Georgia's political, economic, and social life. Oh, sorry. In recent history, somehow POTI was depicted as a place that connects Georgia to the Western world. But also it is a typical post-Soviet port city on the edge that couldn't transform into luxurious holiday residence and wasn't really able to keep its industrial role. Well, the aim of the research, the purpose of the research is to situate POTI's post-Soviet and post-so-called Rose Revolution transformation in the historical context somehow, and to study these transformation processes from the anthropological perspective. What I'm trying to do is that I want to demonstrate how this after Rose Revolution transformations were the biggest changes or structural changes in the history of the city. And I argue that it played a gigantic role in changing everyday practices of locals, in new urban developments, and in creating those informal practices that appeared after port was sold as part of the project of neoliberal project of Mikhail Saakashvili's government. So I somehow look, or the topic that I'm trying to bring up echoes debates about transformation of post-Soviet spaces, privatization, gentrification, and shows in what ways people react to these changes. So the main topics that I'm trying to deal with is what happens when city loses its vital part, and how identities of locals change alongside these transformations. What I'm arguing is that unlike Batumi, which was another big project, like Dato talked about Kutaisi Airport project for Mikhail Saakashvili's a political plan, POTI is a failed project where port is sold forever, and the project of free industrial zone where the airport building was also a part that also mentioned building the airport in Poti is unrealized. And somehow this after Rose Revolution transformations demonstrate the results of these developments that happened after the neoliberal order was established. And accordingly, in this research, I tried to study these new economic practices that were established after transition and how the local community tries to adjust to these new realities. So I also want to talk about a little bit about the theoretical framework. What I'm doing is first is that I really want to situate Poti or study the historical context, how it became a strategic port city, etc. Because even though there are a lot of studies about port cities, we don't really have historical or anthropological research about Georgian seaports and especially Poti. So I'm trying to look at to bring up this perspective also. And then I I take the informality practices theories to deal with this newly emerged practices that I'm talking about. And I also use affect theories and anthropology of melancholia, especially to see how the attitudes or the identities of locals changed according to these new transformation processes. So when we talk about the city, we should understand the processes that followed the Rose Revolution, right? So in 2003, after the revolution, we witnessed somehow the fast economic recovery, improvement of institutional quality. The so-called Georgian economic miracle was abundantly grounded in the neoliberal development model, right? And this initiation of this political dimension in the urban development and advancement of neoliberal approach in the city's policies were processes that followed the revolution, not only in the capital city, Tbilisi, but also in other cities like Kutaisi, like Batumi, like Poti. This is the time when the central government is directly involved in decision-making about various aspects of urban planning, urban development plans, and Poti is not an exception. In 2007, it becomes a subject of President Mikhail Saakashvili's and his governmental team's interest, and they announce that Poti should be a place where this new economic miracle will be implemented, and they announced the creation of a free industrial zone, which I will not talk about this, but in the end it's not realized. It's a failed project and nothing happens. It stands there, this economic zone. Somehow they created the space for it, but nothing really happens. But what happens is that as a part of this new liberal project, the government starts to sell port, which is the vital part of the city. And by 2008, it is fully acquired by Danish company APM Terminals. And what this company does is, first, what they do is gave the port, the civil port also, with the cement wall to separate somehow this landmark from the city in a way. So what I think that what I want to somehow bring to you is that I want to see what happens to the people who are left behind this wall or this neoliberal order. And I'm trying to see if they manage to become part of the new order or the part of the present. And I'm trying to see what is the life on the other side of the cement wall. And for doing this, I'm trying to look at new informal practices that appeared after the port was sold or after the post-Soviet transformation processes. And one of them is fish drying practices that I'm looking at, which started after the collapse of Soviet Union. And as I don't have time, I will not talk about the informality in post-Soviet context, but just to briefly tell you, during the Soviet times, we had informality in Poti. There was informal practices, but this served as a supplement for the system in a way. It was created for somehow balancing the needs that people had or demands which state couldn't really provide. But these new informal practices that appeared after the dissolution of the Soviet socialist order are somehow new responses or new answers to to this neoliberal environment in a way. Rather looking at them as restorations of socialist patterns, or these practices of this new informality should be seen as somehow direct response to the new environment, and not as a heritage of the certain culture or a specific Soviet mentality, right? So to understand the new informal practices created in 40, we have to look at them alongside the processes produced by neoliberal politics. Georgia's transition towards fast economic recovery, adopting new institutionalist approaches, resulted in development and creation of these practices, especially the fish train practices and also illegal fishing. These are pictures from my field in one of the places where I work. These are the fishermen with whom I work also. I'm trying to see how this new state regulations somehow managed to take these fishermen out of the game by restricting them from fishing, because they don't have infrastructure for this saner fishing boats, etc. So they cannot really be part of the legal system in a way. So they have to go illegal, fish in the night, and then sell their products to these fishing train communities, which also operate illegally and informally, and state doesn't regulate these areas in any ways. The second part of my research is that I'm trying to look at my ethnographic material from the perspective of anthropology of melancholia, as proposed by Yashin, where she says that she looks at spaces and places and objects that transmit affect. And I think that port, which is gated, is an infrastructure that can somehow transmit this affect in everyday lives of people or locals of the port city. And somehow it's this spatial melancholia or the environment and atmosphere that discharges these affects in a way. Do I have time? Because I cannot really see because I'm sharing the screen.
Yes, Esma, you have some 3 minutes left.
Yeah, I'm nearly done. And also, what I'm arguing is that the existence of such an infrastructure as a port creates exceptional identities and culture that we encounter in this city. And when the port somehow is not a vital part of the city anymore, these identities that are interconnected with being a dweller of the port city needs to be reshaped. So I'm looking at how these new identities are creating, and upholding connection to the port is largely connected to the constant affective feelings, right? How they talk about the city, my respondents, how the crack in their voice when they remember the glory of the city. And all of this make me think that we are dealing with places of memory and ghosts in a way, right? And this space, which was their space, now becomes somebody else's space, some Danish company's space, right? Port is there in a way, but it's not at the same time. And its presence reminds them of this big loss that cannot be fully articulated. And to use again Yashin's words, port is for me seen as a looted object, which is the great demonstration of how the neoliberal order took away the most essential thing from the city and its dwellers. This is the civil port as it was. I found the pictures in National Archives. And now it was a place where locals would go, and there were cafes, and they would enjoy their hanging out with their friends. They would meet the tourists that came from Ukraine or Russia or some other places. And just they took long walks during the day. But now they cannot really go to that place because it's gated. And also there's a church that's trapped inside the cement wall. And people who go to church have to have special permissions to get to the church. And I call this mourning somehow of the city. And I'm just sharing from this very impressive memory that I have from the field, is that I walked the lighthouse, this Poti famous Shukura, if Georgian people probably know, and with my respondent, and the view is breathtaking. You can see the whole city, the port and everything. And this is where he told me that Rome is an eternal city and Poti is the city of eternal promises. And somehow he sadly stared in the horizon, right? And for him, I felt that for him, as the port as the gate of civilization, as the source of city's social, economic, cultural prosperity is lost. And this is the melancholy about the lost object on which the identity of Poti's inhabitants stands on. And melancholia, in a way that you can hear in their voices, is the mourning about that object. Well, just the expected results is that I believe that this research will deepen the knowledge about the contemporary history of Georgia and will contribute somehow to critically understand the country's post-socialist experience. I have, or this thesis and this research has an ambition to contribute to the debates about post-Soviet countries' developments, on the one hand as an example of one city and one country, and on the other hand as an attempt to grasp general tendencies and to contribute to the theoretical debates. Thank you.
Esma, thank you so much, and thank you for sharing so much from your fieldwork. Now, I believe, please close sharing your screen, and we have again question from Manucher. Do you rely on visual ethnographic methods of photography and video making? Thank you, Manucher, for the question.
Thank you for the question. Yes, I do. When I first started doing fieldwork, I also started doing short documentary film with my friend, and we have a lot of material that we are trying to make into the film, and I hope it will come out, and that will also help me to do ethnography like this. Shared ethnography, right, with my interlocutors and give them voice and etc. These are my beliefs, but I hope it will work.
Do we have any more questions? You can ask directly. You have questions? I want to add that Esma did participant observation, and she participated in drying the fishes and riding boats with illegal fishers. And if you have some questions to her, please. Or Esma, if you want to elaborate on something you did not manage throughout your presentation.
I don't know. I think at this point I don't really have to say much more because it's still very early stage of the research, and well, I just have to say this: all these theories that I'm talking about are somehow very early stages of me trying to explain what is happening in the city, and I don't know. There is a chance that it will change. But for now, I'm working with these concepts, and I would really like your takes on it if you think that this is appropriate somehow. To talk about these transformations, or if you can really see these transformations from this informal practices that I'm talking about, or do you lack anything in that perspective?
I believe this is a question from Esma to the audience. And we have a question from Alexandra. Can your case be compared to another city in Georgia? Well, you answered this question. Esma also gave the audience a question if you find her focus on informality as a good way of seeing the transformation of the city. But now please, Esma, answer Alexandra's question.
Thank you, Alexandra, for this question. I think it can be easily compared to Batumi, but it can be a very contrastive comparison in a way, right? Because on the one hand, it's a great project, Batumi, development of Batumi and this touristic hub, etc. And on the other hand, the city that was promised, and it never happened. So that can be, in a way, a place for comparison. Other other cities, I don't know. I haven't thought about it.
Okay, thank you. We can close our Q&A and open a bigger discussion. If you have questions to four speakers of today's seminar, please raise hands or write your questions in the chat box. And once again, I want to thank all of the four speakers for sharing their wonderful cases, fieldworks, being so enthusiastic towards their research. So floor is open for wider discussion.
I just have a technical question to Esma. Are these pictures, so these pictures, all of them are taken by you, or?
These pictures of the port, of the Moro Vokzal, so-called, the civil port, are from National Archives. And others are, yes, from screenshots from the film that I was working on.
Yes, I had the fish drying practices in mind. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so do we not have feedback or questions to speakers? Or if some of you wanted to say some things and could not say, maybe speakers want to add. I have a feeling Mariam wanted to speak more about her concepts, which she could not because of the lack of the time. We can use this opportunity for elaborating about our topics.
It's okay. Everyone can have some rest.
Okay. And once again, I want to thank all of the audience for being here with us, so many of you for being interested. If we don't have questions, then we can move to the concluding words from the organizers of the seminar. What do you think? Gwen, Narmin, maybe?
Mariam?
We have some.
If we're ready to conclude, I'm Darren, sorry, I'm just a committee member on the Caucasus network. But yeah, we really thank everyone that's that's presented today, and Mariam for co-hosting this event. And for making it very special. So we just have a few final announcements just for the network itself. So we are accepting abstracts and ideas for our autumn seminar series. For our autumn seminar series, which will be running from September to the end of December. So we are happy to hear from individuals with single presentations or collectives who have ideas for multi-speaker events, kind of with an overarching theme. So since we're an interdisciplinary network, we welcome abstracts and proposals from any of the following disciplines relating to the study of the Caucasus and the adjacent regions: archaeology, anthropology, ethnography, history, art history, historical linguistics, and so forth. The network is an inclusive and encouraging environment, and we therefore put particular emphasis on early career researchers to apply. The deadline for that is in 5 days. It's on the 20th of July, so please send in your ideas as soon as possible. Lastly, in September, I will be running a talk on architecture, urbanism, and post-Soviet identities. And I have a few speakers already, and since this presentation is quite similar to the presentation that I'm kind of authoring. If there's anyone in this talk that would like to also present their research, so it's architecture, urbanism, and post-Soviet identities, yeah, please contact me. Yeah, thank you. And also, if you'd like to join the committee, the Caucasus Through Time Network committee, also contact us. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Darren, also about our research, sorry, about our Twitter initiative.
Yeah.
Sorry, Mariam.
Yeah.
You could go. Can you see my screen, right? I shared my screen.
Yes, sorry, I can see it. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so also on our, so because our research network aims to kind of expose young scholars' research, we are trying to set up platforms like Twitter and Facebook to allow you to share your research and kind of allow other scholars to start to engage with your research. So yeah, we have all these platforms for you to get your research out there. So yeah, send in your comments and your ideas to us, and we'll happily share your work to the community. Yeah, thank you. All right, cool. Gwen?
Oh, wait, I'm muted. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining. And thank you to all the speakers. It was really great hearing about your research. I hope you're going to join us again in the future for other events that we host.